Hello everyone, I'm here for another update on my journey to the Dark Tower. I just finished book 4, Wizard and Glass, so I'm here to talk about it a little bit. So if you didn't watch my first video about my journey to the Dark Tower, I don't blame you, it was pretty bad to be honest. So I'll give you a brief recap of the series so far and my thoughts on each book that I've read. Starts with book 1, The Gunslinger. This is about a lone gunslinger, presumably at the end of the world or a world. It's kind of a fantasy western setting, so it mixes those elements along with some horror elements as he chases the man in black across the desert and encounters others along the way. So I first read this one about 3 or 4 years ago. I liked it. It was pretty short. It didn't seem like a complete story, but I was interested in the world. I thought the character was interesting, and I enjoyed the atmospheric tone. And there's some really nice prose work in that one as well. Book number 2 is the drawing of the three. In this one, at the very beginning of Roland, the main character is injured, and so he has to travel to some unexpected locations to get who and what he needs to complete his journey to the Dark Tower. This one was a completely different tone and writing style than The Gunslinger, which I found hard to get into at first. And honestly, I found this book difficult to latch onto for the longest time. I'm not really sure why. I did eventually get into it and finish it, and I rather liked it. It introduces some great new characters. Things get very imaginative and different, and just frankly weird. Book number 3 is The Wastelands, which I read about 2 months ago. This one is my favorite of the series so far. So in this one, Roland has started to develop his group, or his quartet, if you will, and they are now headed for the Dark Tower along the path of the beam. Sinister trains and dead cities stand in their way. So this one was my favorite so far. It has a nice mix of action, character development, world building. It adds some more great new characters, and there's a lot of character growth as well that happens in this book. And the concept of Ka is further developed on. I haven't mentioned that yet, but Ka is kind of like destiny or fate, or some kind of an unseen force. So that gets explained more here in this book. There are tons of great quotes also in the Wastelands, and lots of callbacks to famous authors and stories. I think the whole Dark Tower series does this fairly well, but in the Wastelands there are several direct references to older books, such as Watership Down, The House of Usher, and many others. So I really love that. Anytime you reference Poe, you get brownie points from me, really. And so that leads me to book number 4, Wizard and Glass, which I just finished. And so I think going forward, the best way to structure this series is to update it after each book that I've read, which, that makes sense, doesn't it? So here I am with number 2. So let's get into Wizard and Glass. I did not love this book. I did like it enough. It was not my favorite. So what is it about? Wizard and Glass was published in 1997. It is book number 4 in the Dark Tower series. This one continues immediately after The Wastelands. The events now buckle right into the events in this book. So Roland and his group find themselves in a familiar yet askew location where they are dropped off. And so then Roland begins to tell his backstory, one that has been pulling at him for quite some time now. And so most of this book is his retelling of this story that happened to him when he was younger. And then later at the end, there's a little more progression to the main plot. So Roland's backstory takes place when he was 14 years old. It's kind of a Western romance fantasy kind of a story. It takes place in a small Western town. It tells the story of his original quartet and expands on his desire to seek the Dark Tower. The story tells of love, wizardry, deception, conspiracy, and obviously introduces us to several key moments and characters from Roland's past. So what did I like about this book? Well, there's some great characters, obviously. That's kind of a given for all Stephen King novels. But here he introduces us to mostly an entirely new cast. and then slowly makes us get to care about each one of them. The atmosphere is done beautifully in this book. He uses the changing of seasons and the cycles of the moon really well to track the passage of time in the story, and the setting really does come alive. You can really picture the setting when you're reading it. It's kind of like playing Red Dead Redemption with a twisted Stephen King add-on. The literary parallels are very much intact here still, especially in the last act. So in each Dark Tower book, at the beginning, Stephen King will quote a few poems or novels that relate to the story at hand in some way or another. And the ones in this book are vividly clear at some points, as you will undoubtedly notice if you decide to read it, or if you have read it before. And maybe it's just because I just did read The Grapes of Wrath last month, but I did notice some parallels here in the way of those little interlude chapters that are done. So if you haven't read Grapes of Wrath, before each chapter there is like an interlude chapter or an interchapter or whatever they call it, where it doesn't follow the main characters or the main plot per se. It's kind of a zoomed out wide view of the setting. So it's maybe about this changing of the seasons or bankers or just some general things going on. And I did notice that there were a couple of those sections here in Wizard and Glass. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, but it's something I did notice and draw parallels to. So I kind of like that. I'd say the current story that we're following with Roland and his group is firing on all cylinders here at the beginning. I really loved the resolution. Thought it worked perfectly. And then they are dropped into a world from what I assume was the Stand, but I'm not sure, to be honest. I haven't read that yet. But it seems pretty obvious to anyone who knows what that book is about. I'd say the backstory is also effective as well. It introduces us to a younger Roland and his original quartet. It kind of, the way the plot unfolds gives us insights, gives us much more insight to Roland's personality and his unrelenting quest for the Dark Tower. And I'd say the prose is also very good here. There are some beautiful descriptions. And like I said, the setting really comes alive. So what did I not like about this book? So I'd say there's some, for lack of a better term, subverting of expectations here in kind of a smaller way. Nothing real big. There are just some little moments where it seemed like things are building up to something bigger, but then they just kind of go back to the status quo. And sure, these events may trigger something that will happen later on in the book, but at the time it still kind of goes back to kind of a slow pace, which leads me to the climax of the book, or the resolution. I think the tone is pretty slow for most of the book, for most of the backstory part, and it kind of builds up to the resolution, and then it kind of falls off right after that. I feel like some of the events in the conclusion are a little too clean in some parts. In other parts, things are quite the opposite. Another thing I didn't like was that this was a very long book, overly long if you ask me. It's over 1,000 pages, and I did have some trouble getting through this one. So like I said, it's very slow in most parts. For most of the book, it's rather a rather slow burn. So even when things do ramp up, I still had a little trouble being motivated to keep going. So even though I did enjoy the narrative, I think it's just a little bit too slow and could have been scaled back some. A little too slow and rambly, which is yet another given for Stephen King novels. I'd also say that I was expecting more from some characters. There are some characters that get quite a lot of backstory, a lot of time devoted to them, only to never really do anything much in the end. But then again, maybe I should reserve judgment until I finish the entire series, because maybe they are not done yet. Who knows? So I think in terms of tone, this book is most like The Gunslinger in terms of books in the series. So if you enjoyed The Gunslinger, I think you'll very much like this book. If you found book number 1 a little bit lacking, then you may struggle with this one like I did. As it is, I would place this one and The Gunslinger near the bottom of my rankings right now. But that's not saying much, because I still like all of them. Still enjoy them all well enough. So in the end, I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars for the rating. So now I am over halfway through the Dark Tower series. I am really enjoying it. Just how much I am enjoying it, it's hard to say. I'll likely need some time to process after I finish book 7 to kind of gauge my love for the series as a whole, and also maybe dependent on my reading of other fantasies later on, so I can do a little more thorough comparisons to different series. But it's clear how much love and attention went into the writing of the story, because the world feels completely real, even with all its quirks and its weird rules. The absolute uniqueness of the Dark Tower series cannot be overemphasized. This is something that likely will not be matched by any other series that you'll read or see, and one that only the twisted mind of Stephen King could have brewed in his pot of stuff. That being said, I think I do need another break before I start book 5. So I'll be trying to catch up on a few other things before I start on Walls of the Kala. I'm not yet sure about When Through the Keyhole. If I do read it, it'll be at the end after book 7. But right now I'm not completely sure if I will read that one or not. It doesn't seem like it texts the main story much at all. And if the tone is as slow and methodical as this one, I may not enjoy it. So I may wait until the end of the series to delve into that one, if at all. We'll see how I enjoy book 7 before I decide. Anyway, that's where I'm laying my head to rest tonight. So stay tuned for more Dark Tower updates, probably in a month or so. In the meantime, I'll have some other content. But that's all for now, so thank you for watching.